Well, Mrs. Coleman, it was a pleasure meeting you, he said, releasing my hand. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other. With that, he turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving me standing there with a sense of unease that I couldn't shake. I returned to Jason's side, but my mind was elsewhere. Who is Leo Blackwood, and why did he seem so interested in me? The car ride back to the hotel after the gala was tense. Jason's silence was more oppressive than ever, his face set in a stony expression as he stared out of the window. I knew he was angry about something, but I didn't care enough to ask. I was too preoccupied with the uneasy encounter with Leo Blackwood. There was something about him that felt like a looming threat, but Jason was the least person I wanted to talk to about it. As soon as we stepped into the suite, Jason spun around to face me, his eyes cold and furious. "What the hell were you doing with Leo Blackwood?" he snapped, his voice low but laced with anger. I blinked, caught off guard by the sudden aggression. "Excuse me?" I wasn't doing anything with him. He introduced himself, and we talked for a minute, that's all. Jason stepped closer, his towering presence making me feel small, but I refused to back down. Leo Blackwood is not someone you want to be associated with, Eve. He's dangerous, and he's got his sights set on this company. The last thing I need is for my wife to be seen cozying up to him. His words, my wife, dripped with sarcasm, as if the very idea disgusted him. I squared my shoulders, refusing to let him intimidate me. "I'm not cozying up to anyone, Jason." He approached me, and I was just being polite. "If you're so worried about appearances, maybe you should spend more time by my side instead of ignoring me all night." Jason's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might actually explode. But instead, he took a step back, his expression hardening even further. "You listen to me, Eve. We have a contract, and you will abide by it. No scandals, no entanglements, and definitely no cozying up to other men. Do I make myself clear?" I clenched my fists, my anger rising to match his. "You don't get to control who I talk to, Jason. I'm not your property." "You're right," he snapped back. "You're not my property. You're a contract, a means to an end. But that doesn't mean you can jeopardize everything with your reckless behavior." I was seething now. "Reckless behavior? You think I'm the reckless one? You're the one who dragged me into this farce of a marriage, treating me like an accessory to your life. I'm not here to be your puppet, Jason." He glared at me, his eyes narrowing. "Then start acting like you understand the stakes here, Eve. This is about more than just you or me. It's about this company, my legacy, and everything I've built. Don't mess it up." Without another word, I turned on my heel and marched into the bedroom, slamming the door behind me. I leaned against it, my heart pounding in my chest. I had never felt so angry, so completely fed up with the situation. Jason Coleman was a tyrant, and I was done playing nice. As I paced the room, trying to calm down, I couldn't help but think about the contract, about how I was bound to this man for another 6 weeks. 6 more weeks of enduring his coldness, his arrogance, and his control. Jason's POV. The door slammed shut, and I was left standing in the middle of the living room, seething. Eve was pushing every button I had, challenging me in ways no one else ever dared. I should have been furious. No, I was furious. But there was something else simmering beneath the anger, something that unnerved me. I needed to get a grip. This was business, nothing more. Eve was just a tool, a necessary inconvenience to secure the future of my company. I couldn't afford to let my emotions cloud my judgment. But damn it, she had fire. And that fire was threatening to burn through the carefully constructed walls I had built around myself. I strode over to the bar and poured myself a drink, downing it in one gulp. The alcohol burned as it went down, but it did nothing to quell the storm inside me. How had this woman, this stranger I barely knew, managed to get under my skin so quickly? I slammed the glass down on the counter, my frustration boiling over. I was losing control of the situation, and I hated it. I hated that she had the power to make me feel anything at all. I needed to remind her of her place, remind her that this marriage was nothing but a contract, that she had no power here. I was the one in control, and she needed to understand that. But as I stood there, staring at the closed door of the bedroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were spiraling out of control, that this was no longer just about the contract or the company. It was about Eve and the way she made me feel, angry, frustrated, and something else I couldn't quite name. I had to put a stop to this before it went any further. I couldn't afford to let her get to me. Eve's POV. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind was racing, replaying the confrontation with Jason over and over again. I kept telling myself that I needed to stay strong, that I couldn't let him break me. But it was getting harder and harder to keep up the facade, especially when I knew that this was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to get out of the suite before Jason woke up. I needed some space, some time to clear my head and figure out what my next move would be. I quickly dressed in a simple outfit, jeans, a t-shirt, and a jacket, then grabbed my purse and slipped out of the suite as quietly as I could. I didn't know where I was going, but I just needed to get away from him, from this suffocating situation. As I walked through the streets of New York, I felt a sense of freedom that I hadn't felt in weeks. For the first time since the wedding, I was alone, free to make my own decisions, even if just for a little while. I found a small cafe and ducked inside, ordering a coffee and finding a seat by the window. I sipped my drink slowly, letting the warmth spread through me as I watched the people passing by outside. It was a small comfort, but it was enough to steady my nerves. I pulled out my phone and started researching everything I could about the Coleman family, the company, and Leo Blackwood. Back at the suite, I returned to find Jason waiting for me, his expression dark and unreadable. I could tell he was furious that I had left without telling him, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let him control me. "Where have you been?" he demanded, his voice cold and sharp. "Out," I replied curtly, brushing past him. I needed some air. He grabbed my arm, pulling me back to face him. "You can't just disappear like that, Eve. At least not without my permission. You're the wife, Jason Coleman, for God's sake." I yanked my arm out of his grip, glaring up at him. "Are you serious right now? Because from where I'm standing, it feels more like I'm your slave." His eyes flashed with anger, but I didn't back down. "You can't call me your wife and treat me like trash, Jason. If you want to keep this arrangement going, then you might as well start treating me better." For a moment, I thought he might actually apologize, but then his expression hardened again. "You're not my equal, Eve. You never were, and you never will be. This is my world, and you're just a temporary guest. Don't forget that." I felt a pang of hurt at his words, but I refused to let him see it. Instead, I lifted my chin and met his gaze head-on. "Maybe I'm just a guest, but that doesn't mean I'm going to sit quietly in the corner. You need me, Jason, just as much as I need you. So if you want this to work, you're going to have to start respecting me." He stared at me, his jaw clenched, and for a moment, I thought he might actually agree. But then he turned away, his voice cold and distant. "Just stay out of my way, Eve. We only have a few weeks left. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Jason's POV. I slammed the door behind me, my frustration boiling over. Eve was becoming more of a problem than I had anticipated. She was supposed to be compliant, a willing participant in this charade, but instead, she was challenging me at every turn. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I poured myself another drink, trying to drown out the conflicting emotions swirling inside me. She was right about one thing: I needed her. But I wasn't about to admit that to her, or to myself. Needing someone made you weak, and I couldn't afford to be weak. But damn it, she was strong. Stronger than I had given her credit for. And that strength was starting to mess with my head. As I downed my drink, I couldn't shake the image of her defiant expression, the fire in her eyes when she stood up to me. It was infuriating, but it was also something else. Something I didn't want to think about. I was in control here, not her. I had to keep reminding myself of that. But the more she pushed back, the more I felt that control slipping away. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't let that happen. Eve's POV. One evening, as we were preparing to attend yet another corporate event, I decided to take a stand. I was tired of being the obedient, compliant wife, tired of playing a role that didn't suit me. As I dressed for the event, I chose an outfit that was bold and confident, a sleek, black dress that hugged my curves and made me feel powerful. I styled my hair in loose waves and applied my makeup with precision, emphasizing my eyes and lips. I wanted to make a statement, to show Jason that I wasn't someone he could easily control. When I emerged from the bedroom, I saw the surprise in his eyes. He quickly masked it, but I knew I had caught him off guard. "You're not wearing that," he said, his tone cold and authoritative. I crossed my arms, meeting his gaze with a defiant smile. "Oh, but I am. And there's nothing you can do about it." His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as he took a step closer. "Don't push me, Eve." I stood my ground, refusing to be intimidated. "I'm done following your orders, Jason. If you want to keep up appearances, then you're going to have to start treating me like an equal. Otherwise, I'll walk out of that event tonight and make it very clear that this marriage is nothing more than a sham." For a moment, I thought he might actually explode, but instead, he took a deep breath, his expression hardening. "You think you can threaten me? You think I'll just let you ruin everything I've worked for?" I held his gaze, my heart pounding in my chest. "Try me." He stared at me, his fists clenched tightly as if he was fighting to control himself. I knew that I had pushed him to the edge, and it greatly feared me. What if he resorted to violence with the way I was pushing him? Would I be able to withstand his fury? I had intentionally worn the dress to provoke him, but I wasn't expecting such a reaction from me. He moved away from me and took his phone to place a call. After some minutes, we heard the doorbell chime. I watched as he made for the door. I was unable to see who he was talking with, only noticed the package in his hand when he walked back into the room. "Here, go change into this dress. I wouldn't want you looking like a slut while attending a function with me." I was speechless. Did he just call me a slut? We were almost running behind time, so I quickly made for the dressing room without arguing with him. The dress was quite beautiful. To be frank, Jason had a great taste when it comes to feminine dresses. I didn't expect him to know my perfect size. More orals a dress that accentuated my body type perfectly. It was as if the dress was made specially for me. When I stepped out of the dressing room, he was gone. I wasn't bothered. I knew that he was probably outside waiting for me to come out. The event was in full swing, the room filled with the city's elite, all dressed in their finest attire. Jason and I made our entrance, the picture-perfect couple, if only they knew the truth about us. I could feel the eyes of the other guests on me, their whispers barely concealed as they speculated about the nature of our relationship. But I didn't care. I was done pretending, done playing by Jason's rules. As we moved through the crowd, Jason's hand on my arm felt like a vice, his grip tight and controlling. But I refused to let him dictate my actions. I smiled and made polite conversation with the guests, but my mind was elsewhere, focused on the next move in this twisted game we were playing. When we reached the center of the room, I saw Leo Blackwood standing near the bar, his eyes locking onto mine the moment he saw me. A shiver ran down my spine, but I forced myself to remain calm. I wasn't going to let him intimidate me. Jason noticed him too, his expression darkening as he tightened his grip on my arm. "Stay away from him," he hissed under his breath. I turned to him, my smile sweet but my eyes hard. "You don't get to tell me what to do, Jason." He opened his mouth to retort, but I didn't give him the chance. I slipped out of his grasp and made my way over to Leo, my heart pounding in my chest. This was a risk, but I was done playing it safe. Leo greeted me with a charming smile, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Mrs. Coleman, I didn't expect to see you here." I returned his smile, though it didn't reach my eyes. "It seems we keep running into each other." "Fate, perhaps," he suggested, his tone light but his gaze intense. "Or coincidence," I countered, not wanting to give him any ground. He chuckled, clearly enjoying the banter. "You're different from the last time we met. More confident, I think." I shrugged, taking a sip of my drink. "Oh, really? Should I take that as compliment?" "Yeah," he said, his smile widening. "But be careful, Mrs. Coleman. This world can be a dangerous place for someone like you." I narrowed my eyes, my instincts telling me that there was more to his words than just a friendly warning. "Someone like me?" He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Someone who's playing a game they don't fully understand." Before I could respond, Jason appeared at my side, his expression cold and furious. "We're leaving," he said, his voice clipped. I met his gaze, refusing to back down. "We just got here." "Now, Eve," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. I turned back to Leo, offering him a polite smile. "It was nice talking to you." Leo nodded, his eyes flicking between Jason and me with a knowing look. "Likewise. Take care, Mrs. Coleman." As Jason dragged me out of the event, I could feel the anger brimming in him, and it scared him. What if he got violent with me?